Nope. All right, moving on. We'll go to prior month's minutes.
They were fine.
Any objections?
No objections.
All right. That will consider those approved. We will move on. You know, I'm going to switch these around a little bit just in case here. And we're going to look at the resolution that was prepared today. It'd be Resolution 59, 2021. Did you guys both receive a copy of that?
Yep.
Did you have any questions, any issues with it? This is more like a safe play.
Which one is it? Is that
This is the public
administrative?
utilities.
Okay.
It's in that packet I gave you, it's just the second one, not the
Do the
first
second
one.
Yeah. No, I looked at it at the office.
Okay.
I don't see it again. It looked fine.
Yeah, our code kind of matches one director of public utilities. I thought it'd be wise to just explain that we're paying two people right now for that position. We expect it to be a transitory period.
Mm-hmm.
So, with no objections, any objections to that being recommended to council?
No.
All right, Tim?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, we'll
And
consider that.
Chairman Coolman, you want that to go tonight?
Yes, please. We'll recommend it 3-0, and I'll consider it being passed as an emergency at the council meeting tonight. And then, would you prefer me to talk about the deputy city administrator position before I just didn't want to leave the mayor out of the conversation for the 26611. I know we're going to have further conversation on that,
We
but
can certainly talk about Deputy City Administrator.
yeah, I'm going to kind of go out of order here and just jump to number 4 and update on that.
I'll get on that. I don't know if you have received your emails today from the city, but we did send out an email this morning regarding our work with Jeramin LLC, and I know Elaine Panterno has reached out to many of the council members, and they would like to speak with each council member one-on-one. They have a list of leadership organizational questions, and I think some just in general city questions about what's important to you, what do you see as concerns. So that's the next step in our leadership and our organizational assessment. And then once they have those meetings with all the elected officials, then they're going to follow back up and I believe put together their draft report on the organizational structure. Then they'll still have some work to do with senior staff on leadership training. So I think we're getting close to getting some external recommendations on the look and feel of our structure, which we think will impact that position.
Okay. So I guess do you see that, I guess want to say it's kind of like an informal survey, right? To an extent, or a leadership survey. Do you see that as kind of sculpting the scope of that position, or?
It could certainly do that. We see the need for a position, but it may not be exactly that position. Based on the conversations that all the senior staff have had with Mr. Daniels and his wife, as well as with the mayor back and forth, we see this maybe going in a slightly different way, but still in a very positive way.
Like an additional position, but not necessarily called?
Correct. But I think part of your input with answering these questions and having that dialogue,
Gotcha.
Mr. Daniels will help shape a recommendation from him.
Okay, so I may have further questions on that after we council, I guess, complete the
Yes,
survey,
yes.
because I don't want what you tell me to bias the information that I'm going to provide or anybody else here. I feel like that's what you're trying to tell.
And that's why I'm only so much, because yes, I don't want to
Okay, fair.
have you read anything into it or anything like that. So we've had some very good conversations with those two. And there's a couple senior staff that they do have some follow-up questions for, that we're getting them on the books. But his next biggest task is talking with each of the 7 council members,
Okay.
getting your input and feedback.
Do either of you have any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay, do we have a timeline for when we expect that information?
I think Mr. Fuller has signed up for a tour of duty with Mr. Daniels, so I think
There's a time period on the email.
there's a time period as soon as next week, the week after, and I think 2 weeks after that. But Elaine, I think briefly spoke with you today, Councilman Coleman.
Yeah.
And I think you were going to double check your calendar. So I think shortly thereafter, the
Okay.
last one is done, whatever that last date is.
So next personnel, we might be,
Preliminary. Hopefully, yes, yes.
okay, so we'll plan on keeping that on the agenda for now.
We will certainly do so.
And then I guess let's go ahead and move on. I know we have a proposed codified ordinance amendment in front of us for 26611B. Do you want to go ahead and take us through that?
I know that there was extensive discussion at the council meeting that I was unable to attend regarding the definition of any 12-month period. And my legal recommendation to the mayor as well as to city council is that we define any 12-month period so there's no longer any ambiguity about its meaning, and that based on past practice, it should be defined as a calendar year, which is the same as the fiscal year for the city of Perrysburg, which makes the most sense in terms of how past practice has gone and the finances of the city. So all I did then was add a sentence to the current 26611-1B at the end to say, for the purposes of this section, a 12-month period is the same as a calendar year, which is the same as the fiscal year for the city of Perrysburg.
I think that certainly clears it up. I guess I kind of want to get back into a little bit. Does anybody have questions on the language first?
No, yeah, there's a copy.
Yeah, it's right in front of, gave it to you. It's in
I
the,
think it was behind the other resolution.
Ah, cool.
Yeah, it should be the front page.
Oh, yeah. No, I was good with it. I just thought there was a way we could use less words. So it's a minor deal.
I don't have questions on that, on the addition. I guess I would have some other questions about, there's other stuff in there pertains to like the percentage. I would have a question about that. Want to discuss that now? Or?
I mean, I guess I don't want to leave the mayor out of that conversation to the extent that he takes part in that. But if you can enlighten us, I have a feeling you're heavy-handed in that process as well, Bridget, with determining potential raises, cost of living.
Actually, I was not.
Okay, so that's a conversation we need to have with the mayor.
Yes.
And he indicated he'd be here about 5:00.
About 5:30, yeah.
Yeah, what we typically do is we go through a review process, performance evaluations. Kelly and I receive them all. We look at them. We obviously pass them on to the mayor. And what we passed on to him as well were different indices that were being utilized in the first, I'll say, quarter, 4 months of the year, this year, letting him know, like, here's what Social Security was doing, here's what OPERS was doing, here's what the CPI the last 3 months of 2021 was, here's what the CPI of the first 3 months of 2022 is. And so we provided him that information, and he reviewed it, and he gave the two pieces to almost all of the bargaining employees, which was a cost of living plus a merit. But the rationale behind that was his rationale.
I guess I don't know, I know Tim, I think, were you on council then when that was, like, I guess I'm kind of referencing the 7%. I guess I know where council stood on that at the time when it was, like, where did we get that number from and how do we find that?
I don't know how we came up exactly with 7%, but it was a trade-off between the mayor had the latitude to make increases. And I think it was a specific reaction to a mayor who'd gotten a little out of bounds. And so council wanted to put some control on it to say essentially what it says. You can't go any higher than 7% in any calendar year unless it's concurred in by council. So that was just the thinking. We'd had some willy-nilly increases, and there was just concern to at least put some boundaries on what the mayor can do on his own.
Do you know what the threshold was before that 7%?
wasn't
Just to
any.
give us kind of a
There wasn't
comparison.
any.
Okay.
As I recall, I mean, someone could dredge up all the old ordinances, but I don't think there was any.
I don't recall that.
That was well before me.
You know,
I don't remember there being.
Amber may be able to, through the use of Mr. Krebs's maybe past ordinance books, be able to track that down, but
Well, prior to 2003, 4, 5, we had a matrix for salaried employees there,
Oh, that's
and it
right.
was just automatic.
That's right.
So around 2005 is when that changed. So prior to that, it was set up like the union employees, where this is your first year, second year, third year, and those got updated every 3 years, just like the contracts did.
Well, that's good to remember, because we just have that lockstep.
Yep.
You progress to the top. But I think, did we have some people that had, even under the old system, exceeded the top? Or did it, under the old system, you hit the top and you were just there? You only got whatever general increases we made to the matrix.
That's my recollection.
But then there was that interim period where,
Because I was the first employee that was brought in outside of the matrix. So
oh, so
I was the guinea pig.
you possess all the history.
Say I can remember it.
Yeah, I know I can't.
So that's when we tried to develop the wage and compensation program that was part of that. History was spelled out in the form I sent you recently. Just talk about the history of when that was established and how those ranges were put in place with the help of Clemens Nelson back in the day.
And I guess I had something in my mind, I guess, think of like more like in a corporate world regarding like if you were to have a board, right? Like typically like a frontline manager or supervisor. The supervisor will give their employees usually a cost of living. I would say it's pretty common, right? And then you have would probably have a merit raise, which to me, I don't know, I guess somewhere in my head, and 7% seems a little bit more than, even if it was a 2 to 3% cost of living increase, an additional, say, 3 to 2% on top of that for a merit increase, which would put it around somewhere around 5, seems pretty, at least from some of the stuff that I've done, the research on my own, seems pretty common. 7 seems a little bit high, and if they were to go in excess of that, some of those managers and things like that, they would go to their board of directors, right, to ask for permission. That's what almost seems like is kind of structured like. And I guess my only question was, like, to me, the 7% seems a little bit high, that's all. So I just was hoping for maybe there's a reason why we picked 7%.
Yeah, and I can't help you much with that, Kevin. I think there was just a recognition. Well, actually, the other part of the understanding is, at that time, Maria Ermy chaired personnel at the time, was that we then, the mayor would every year share with at least the personnel committee the increases everyone received. And as well as to know who didn't get increases. This part I kind of do remember, because we thought, okay, we picked 7%, and then I'd be willing to bet you that Maria would have better memory of this than I would, but the thought was, put it at 7%, let's dry run it for a few years, look at what kinds of increases are given, and if we got to adjust to 7% at some point, we'll talk about doing that. Because then, for at least initially, well, I think during the entire time Maria was chairman of the Personnel Committee, annually we'd see the administrative increases. And they were more informative, quite frankly, to know who was getting dinged, quite frankly. I don't recall us ever having a quarrel at that time with any, the amount of any increases. It was just more informational. We'd say, hey, why is Joe Blow, getting nothing or very, and it was, obviously that was all done in executive session. And the other thing I can't recall is, I don't think we had that many large adjustments, but at that time, you weren't competing to hire employees the way you are now, to hire and retain. So that's about all I can remember as to how we got to where we got.
I was kind of,
Also, it does look like in 2006 perhaps is when that was added to the code.
So it's coming right off the matrix.
Yep, when the wage ranges were put into place.
And I'm just thinking for for posterity, right? I mean, like if you were to look at, like, let's just say we go to the calendar year structure, right? And this resolution passes. If theoretically a mayor on December 31st of a given year could give the 7% raise, and then on January 1st could give the 7% raise. So in a matter of 2 days, you have employees getting a 14%
Yep.
raise. To me, that seems very excessive. And I guess for, you know, again, for future sake, I think, you know, I don't know, I'm not arguing again with the language that we're putting in there. I'm kind of just looking at how it could be abused in the future, right? So we don't end up in a scenario where we're back questioning something, a decision, you know, like that the mayor may have done or made, right?
And that's, I really think, why we said in any 12-month period. You know, that term obviously must be ambiguous because it admitted of different interpretations, but in a lot of our employment laws, you know, FMLA and laws like that, it's a rolling 12-month period.
Well, it's
Yeah, I
however the
understand.
employer defines it. For FMLA, it's however the employer defines it. You have some choices, rolling forward, rolling back,
Yeah, yeah.
calendar year.
But even under those, though, I think most people just say, okay, where we are right now, let's look back in the prior 12 months. You know, if we exceeded 12%, with this increase, will we exceed 7% in the 12 months? But I'm okay with calendar year, because, you know, even in a 12-month period, well, I think if you just had any rolling 12-month period, you can't have happen what Kevin's suggesting that could happen here. You could give the 2022 increase in December of 2022, and the 2023 in January of 2023. But, and the only other thing I'd add on that is that we recognized on council at the time that the mayor, presumably with some input from people like Kelly and Bridget, you know, is closer to what's going on in this building on a day-to-day basis. I'm not, I never have been, and I shouldn't be. There's no reason for me to come around here every day and check up on people. So the thought was, hey, whoever the mayor is, they're here, they're dealing with issues on a day-to-day basis. Not saying they got to be physically present here every day, but they know a lot more about what people are really doing than any of us.
I'll tell you what my initial take is on this, which is probably maybe a little different than everybody else's. I agree with Kevin. I don't really understand the 7%. I also don't necessarily see a huge deal of having stuff come before council. So I would tend to think 7% is high, and I would tend to want to deviate down to 5%. Authority to do that. But I also have been thinking about this 12-month period, and I really don't care about the rolling. I just want consistency, really, and I was thinking of a way to accomplish that. As far as how I view this as the chair of the personnel committee too, and I really would love language, and hopefully it would be beneficial to all parties, that would allow this to only happen in the first quarter of the year. So you have if you're the mayor, you can do this raise up to 5% somewhere between January and March.
What if you're in negotiations there?
Well, I don't think that's necessarily a valid excuse not to give the non-bargain employees a raise. I really just don't.
It's not a valid excuse, but it's a factor you'll consider. If you're telling the unions you're going to accept 3% and you hand Bridget and Kelly 4.5%, good luck when you go to fact finding. That's the issue I see with trying to look at the first calendar quarter. I mean, it's valid, you're right, because like we said, I think I said it in this discussion, those increases that piled up that we got concerned about, some could view that first raise as kind of a deferred increase that the administrative employee should have received earlier in the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't necessarily view it as fair to our non-bargain employees that we're holding them out. They don't know when these raises are coming. I'm trying to narrow down a period of time where, hey, if the mayor hasn't come and talked to me or the administrator hasn't come to talk to me January through March to do a performance review and consider merit raises and cost of living, it's not happening unless it goes in front of council. Kind of gives a purview, and then it also, as personnel chair, it gives me a time period where I expect to review those raises at the administration. Because that's some of the dialogue we've had at personnel is, hey, when's a good time to review this? Because I want to give you the discretion because you guys are here day to day, but I would like to set up a timeline where I can review those every year. So I can help understand them. We can go to executive session if we have to parse out certain employees and understand why they didn't or did get a raise. So that was kind of my take on it. I think it provides some stability for the non-bargaining employees too. An expectation of a timetable for review.
Yeah, I suppose it would, but
What do you do with employees who come in after the raises were given?
What do you mean, like new hires? Do we typically give new hires raises within the first?
Quite possibly within the first 6 months after an initial 6-month time period.
So like after the probationary?
Potentially, yes.
Is that usually in the contract that gets approved?
Well, it's a non-bargaining unit employee, so that there is no contract.
Okay, so I mean, I guess what's the fear of going before council to say, hey, we had so-and-so, they did great during their.
Oh, I don't have a fear. That's not my job.
I mean, is
that's
that's
the mayor's fear.
that's
That's for the mayor to make that decision. No, I was just pointing that out, that there could be timing issues.
So I guess
non-bargaining.
an exception for someone that's hired after March of that same year. I mean, you could carve out something to address that specific concern.
I don't know, I guess to me, Corey, that's the only part I guess I really agree with you, because I guess in my mind, those are administrative faculties, right? And those are managerial tasks that, to me, in this scenario, I think I'm more focused on the percentage, just because, you know, we don't need to micromanage their structure, the way that they operate. I don't feel that way, right? And the language is what gives us the checks and balance. And again, I still think 7% is high. I would say focus on that. I think we're able to hone in more of like the oversight on that, or again, that checks and balances with that. But I mean, because there's always circumstances, right? I mean, I'm not buying, I don't buy the collective bargaining thing at all. I don't think it's fair to the bargaining unit employees. And I get from the fact-finding perspective, but what that does to morale, right? I mean, when they look back, and if I was sitting at the negotiation table, I'd pull up and say, hey, your people, 2 years or 3 years from now, whenever that contract's being negotiated, I'm going to go back and I'm going to pull this record up, and that's what I'm going to use at the bargaining table again, right? So I guess in my mind, it does, for morale issues for the regular service, the police and fire, anybody that's under collective bargaining, I mean, they know, right? They know what the administrative staff is getting as far as raises go. When they look and say, hey, I've got 2.5%, and there are people out there that got 7 to 10%. I mean, that doesn't do fare well for morale. And the mayor sat in here, and I can't wait till he gets here, because he stuck by his guns. He stuck up for the city employees, but they're part of the city too, right? The bargaining unit employees. So I don't necessarily buy that excuse, but I do think that 7% again is a little high. So I just hope maybe he can provide some clarification on as to why it's 7%, or why maybe he can justify that. I don't know.
Yeah, your sentiment's well taken. I think it might be overstepping, quite frankly, the time period I suggested, but I'm looking at when these raises occurred, and it's just utterly inconsistent. Yeah, if you're a non-bargaining employee of the city, you have no idea. How often do performance reviews occur?
Once a year.
Once a year? Is there a set timeline for that?
Since I've been here, we've tried to do it in the first part of the year, but it depends if you have a new mayor coming in. And if the new mayor or the current mayor changes what the performance evaluation will be, it takes time then to build that new document, and then make sure everybody understands what the rationale is behind each of the questions and how to respond. So with changing of the guard, it has changed over time. Nelson Evans used to do it differently than Mike Olmsted, than Mayor Mackett. And sometimes within each of those administrations, it changes within that time frame as well. This year specifically, we changed to a different format for the performance evaluations than what we've used the past 2 years.
I don't necessarily have any, I think some of these can be answered probably with talking to the mayor, which is probably more appropriate in executive session as we're going over some of the personnel percentages. But before we do that, if you guys don't mind, I'll skip forward and address the other things in the agenda, because I know we have a public utilities meeting at 6.
Oh, we do?
And I don't want to put them in a time crunch, push back our council meeting because of that. So I'll go ahead and move on with the intent of coming back to talk with the mayor to agenda item number 5, resolution regarding section 248.01. Someone can take me through that. Oh, this is the.
Already did
No, oh, we already did that. All right. I just had it wrong in my head. All right, we took care of that, so we're good to go as the mayor walks out.
I don't know if you wanted to discuss it all briefly.
Oh, yes.
Materials.
Briefly,
Yeah, if you got a summary sheet, I'd gladly.
Yes.
Yes. So
Kelly and I worked on that this afternoon.
in other business, I appreciate
Just because
that.
my brain couldn't handle it.
So we did not summarize, the first document that Kelly provided you is from our health plan. So
Okay.
that is not summarized on here. But what we tried to do then is take each category of employee, non-bargaining, IAFF, the 3 OPBAs, and the AFSCME, and point out what our code section says and/or their collective bargaining agreement.
Okay.
And I think I made it short of myself. But it's, and Kelly can probably help explain this chart better than I can, because she lives with leaves better, more often than I do.
Okay, and to give the people in the audience kind of a quick overview of the information in front of us, I sent an email on Friday requesting all, pretty much all the information I can gather on prenatal care, maternity and paternity care, as well as whether we have a pre-tax daycare incentive program. And that's what they're providing me kindly, as well as a nice summary sheet of our bargain versus non-bargain employees and how they fall on different things.
So if you look at maternity leave, in our codified ordinances, there's 2 sections that reference maternity leaves and how we handle them. So for each category of employees, it's essentially the same. It's a total of 60 days, and they start off using sick time. If that gets exhausted, then they can move to vacation, they can move to comp, and then they could ask for unpaid leave to complete that 60 days or 12 weeks of time. If you're on the parental leave, even I use the word paternity leave because Councilman Coleman did it in his email, but if you are the other parent who is not actually having the child, each category is a little bit different with the exception of the police, which is consistent across their 3 bargaining units. So non-bargaining unit, full-time employees, again, would be accorded a total of 60 days or 12 weeks. 30 days can be sick leave, and then thereafter, they can utilize vacation, comp, or request unpaid leave. The IAFF negotiated back in the day, whenever that may have been, if you are a 24-hour employee, then you have 7 shifts that you can take as sick leave. If you're an 8-hour employee in the collective bargaining agreement, then you can take 15 8-hour shifts of sick leave. And then after that, if you still want to utilize that up to the 12 weeks, then it goes vacation and you can request unpaid. OPBA, all of them are 15 shifts, whether it's 8.5 or an 8-hour shift of sick time. After that, vacation comp unpaid. And the AFSCME unit is at 7 8-hour shifts of sick. Then they can request to use their vacation time, any comp time, and/or request an unpaid leave. And all of FMLA is unpaid. And if somebody is on or requesting a leave, they are still employed with the city, so they cannot collect unemployment benefits. And we currently don't have a pre-tax program for some sort of, and I'm going to look to Ms. Rathburn out in the audience, for like a flexible spending account where you could put money away pre-tax. There used to be a program like that with the city, I understand, many moons ago, and we have one employee who is still on that supplemental insurance plan, who has been with the city 40-some years, I think.
More of a short time, or short-term.
Short-term disability. But there is no pre-tax program like a flexible spending account where you can put money away pre-tax. Ms. Rathburn explained to me today that in places where she has worked that has done something like that, you're essentially, at least for childcare purposes, you're essentially doing your child credit, tax credit sooner rather than later, is essentially kind of what you're doing in that particular case. But are there other programs or services out there, quite possibly, that you could do pre-tax?
Yeah, because it'd be nice to see like a health savings account or, you know, an HRA, something for the city. That'd be great.
We've talked about that on many occasions since I've been here, and none of the collective bargaining units have been interested at all to discuss that.
Surprising.
There's generally a minimum participation number for flexible spending accounts for the childcare. So we'd have to have a certain number of people participate in order to make that an option for whoever the third-party administrator is. That's my recollection from when we did it back in the day, in the early 2000s, and we tried it and it didn't go well. And there were only 2 people that participated. So
have you guys ever discussed like an employer match or percentage match on it?
no.
It's typically those accounts, right? I mean, you could pay for like your prescription drugs or copay,
Or
medical bills and things like that.
for a health savings account, yes.
But I don't know if
But
that's
this
the case
isn't,
for
that's,
flexible spending.
I think, different than.
There are 2 types of the FHA, the flex. There's the medical and the childcare is different. It's the same thing, but there's 2 different groupings, if you will.
I guess I would like to leave this as an agenda item. I knew we weren't gonna get too deep into it this time. One of the questions I would add to this chart, if I could get, is and I don't know how far back, I'll leave that up to you, but if we could get an average, because you gave us kind of a per occurrence cost, an average, so 12 weeks pay would range from, so I think I asked you for 100% coverage on a 12-week maternity leave, and you
Yep.
said, you gave me a range. How often people are on parental leave? Like, what's our average?
Not often.
Okay. It would just, because I want to start analyzing numbers on what it would cost to
Go back.
do percentages of that, or,
Try to track that backwards from when we've added dependent children on health insurance and try to track backwards. I can try to find something like that.
because I think, you know, we don't have too much on our personnel agenda, and I think now, more than ever, we need to take steps to make sure that our employees are being taken care of, that are raising families, and make sure they have access to quality health care measures and care for their family members. So I would like to thoroughly review that and see how much it would cost to potentially look at providing some additional help there.
One quick question on this before we leave it. On all these, the maternity leave, are the employees required to use their sick and vacation and comp before they go unpaid? Or can they just say, make me unpaid?
They are certainly required to use their sick and vacation per the code before they request unpaid. But if they do have comp time available, that is not required by their contract or the code, but they could certainly utilize that before asking for unpaid.
And the OPBA contracts allow to hold back 5 sick days. Spend all but 5 sick days if they wish. They can hold the 5 back, which they negotiated in. And FMLA runs concurrent with that paid time off. It's not stacked, it's concurrent.
But
12 weeks total, even though you're exhausting your pay.
But to put the negative spin on it, we're forcing them to substitute. I mean, if they wanted to go unpaid.
Yes.
Okay. And that's negotiated different ways in different places. I'm putting a negative spin on it, but it comes out different ways.
I'm sure there will be some emails that go back and forth for information gathering, but I would like that to remain on.
Well, we'll start off gathering information on the recent history of utilization.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, obviously, any moves we make, I think, would affect our non-bargaining employees before the bargained employees. So, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and consider other business taken care of, unless there's any other business. If not, we'll go ahead and move to go to executive session to discuss
Compensation of public employees.
compensation of public employees. And I'll just go ahead and request that committee members and the mayor be included in that.
We don't need the three of us?
Correct.
Oh, where's the?
There you go.
Where we go?
Do you want to just go to the conference room? Getting old, those stairs are tough to go down.
Why don't you take that with you and show that to them and see if they'd rather it said that?
I mean,
I just found a typo in my spreadsheet. It was grammatical, it did not make sense whatsoever.
Okay. Hey,
Yes, dear.